Thanks, John. Right, chapter 9. Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to his mother's brothers in Shechem and said to them and to all his mother's clan, "Ask all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, to have all 70 of Jerubbaal's sons rule over you, or just one man? Remember, I am your flesh and blood." When the brothers repeated all this to the citizens of Shechem, they were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is related to us." They gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, and Abimelech used it to hire reckless scoundrels who became his followers. He went to his father's home in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding. Then all the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo gathered beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. When Jotham was told about this, he climbed up on top of the Mount Gerizim and shouted to them, "Listen to me, citizens of Shechem, so that God may listen to you." One day the trees went out to anoint a king for themselves. They said to the olive tree, "Be our king." But the olive tree answered, "Should I give up my oil, by which both gods and humans are honored, to hold sway over the trees?" Next the tree said to the fig tree, "Come and be our king." But the fig tree replies, "Should I give up my fruit, so good and sweet, to hold sway over the trees?" Then the trees said to the vine, "Come, be our king." But the vine answered, "Should I give up my wine, which cheers both gods and humans, to hold sway over the trees?" Finally, all the trees said to the thorn bush, "Come and be our king." The thorn bush said to the trees, "If you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Have you acted honorably and in good faith by making Abimelech king? Have you been fair to Jerubbaal and his family? Have you treated him as he deserves? Remember that my father fought for you and risked his life to rescue you from the hand of Midian. But today you have revolted against my father's family. You have murdered his 70 sons on a single stone and have made Abimelech, the son of his female slave, king over the citizens of Shechem because he is related to you. So you have acted honorably and in good faith towards Jerubbaal and his family today. If you have, may Abimelech be your joy, and may you be his too. But if you have not, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and let fire come out from you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and consume Abimelech." Then Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech.
Great, thank you, Johnny. Keep that passage open. We'll look at the second half of chapter 9 as well in a little bit. And really, in fact, let me grab the clicker. So last week we were looking at the life of Gideon, and we saw 8 lessons to learn from Gideon's life. This week, as we look at Abimelech, who's one of Gideon's sons, there is just one big thing that I think that we need to learn, and it's this: don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king. See, that's the big thing that this passage is showing us. And it is just as much a danger for us today as it was all those thousands of years ago for these ancient Israelites. But don't worry, this isn't some political statement. It's not a view on King Charles. This is more about don't put your trust in the wrong thing or person. Not necessarily a king on a throne in Westminster or Windsor, but the people or the things that we let rule our lives. See, for these ancient Israelites, as we'll see in the passage, they choose a guy that they think is going to solve all of their problems. A guy that they think, well, he's going to be on our side, and so we'll be all right. They don't really care what he's like, whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. They just care about what it will get them. They basically look at Abimelech and think, well, he's family. He might be a scumbag, but he's on our side. And surely that means life will be better for us. Don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king. It was no different in Jesus' day. The Israelite people were cruelly ruled by the Romans. And if you know anything much about the Romans, they were not very nice to the people that they ruled. You get imprisoned, enslaved, sent to the gladiator pits, fed to the lions, all those kinds of things. It wasn't a great life. And yet when Jesus comes claiming to be the King of the Jews, comes preaching peace and justice and forgiveness and kindness, many of the Jews look at those choices. They've got a choice of following Jesus or following Caesar, and they make the wrong choice. Listen to how it's put in John chapter 19. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. And finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. See, those Jewish people, they didn't like Caesar, but they chose Caesar over Jesus because of what they thought they could get out of it. They thought, well, the Romans are pretty rubbish, but under Caesar, we're powerful, we're influential, we've got a cushy job. Who cares what's right or wrong? We just want what we can get out of it. And aren't we the same? How often do we hear about people choosing their leaders, saying things along the lines of, well, the ends justify the means, don't they? Oh, I don't really love his methods, but you can't argue with the results. Don't we see that in politics, in sports, even in churches? And don't we justify that in ourselves with all sorts of choices that we make too? Oh, I know it's illegal, but it makes me feel good. I know that chasing after that relationship isn't what God wants, but it makes me happy, and so surely that's okay. But Judges 9 is telling us, don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king. Don't follow the wrong thing that you might think will give you joy and satisfaction and happiness and comfort and power now, because it won't last. It won't succeed. It will just fail. You see, in our passage, the Israelites want a king, and actually they need a king. If you were here last week, maybe you'll remember Judges chapter 8, verses 22 and 23. Let me read those to you. The Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson, because you've saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." You see, Gideon, who's also called Jerubbaal, he had rescued them from the Midianites. He had been rescued from these people who were trying to completely destroy them. And so they basically say to him, "Be our king. You and your children and your children's children, you'll be this dynasty of kings who will rule us." And Gideon says the right thing. He says, no, the Lord is your king. The Lord will rule you. But although he refuses their request in words, actually with his actions, he basically wants to be their king, but without the responsibility. So he takes all of their tribute, and he even names his son Abimelech. And Abimelech means, my dad is the king. You know, so he can say the right thing, oh, no, I won't be the king. But he names his son, my dad is the king. You see the problem there? There's a whole lot of problem going on there. But the truth is, the Israelites do need a king. The whole of the book of Judges is about their need for a king. Back in Deuteronomy 17, God has even said, you will ask for a king, and I will give you a king. You'll need to have a king. But there's some very specific instructions about what that king must be like. In Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 to 20, I won't read the whole thing, but let me give you the summary. You can turn to it if you want. But here are the things that God says the king of the Israelites must be. God must choose them. They must be an Israelite. They must not go chasing after riches. They must not take the people back to Egypt. They must not have loads and loads of wives. They must write out a copy of God's law and read it every day. And they must not consider themselves better than any of their fellow Israelites. So these rules about what God's king must be like in Deuteronomy 17 have been given, that is the kind of king that the Israelites need. But here in Judges chapter 9, they're so blinkered by what they want that they basically forget almost all of those instructions. And unsurprisingly, it doesn't go well for them. Don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king. It will not succeed. You see, Gideon's got all of these sons. He's got 70 sons by his many wives, and then he's got this concubine who has this other son, Abimelech, and already there's a lot of problems going on there about the kind of guy that Gideon is and the kind of family that he leads. But it seems like there's an assumption by the Israelites that Gideon's sons are going to rule. So they're basically offered a choice by Abimelech. He's like, look, you've got a choice. There's 70 of those guys and me. Either all of us can rule, and that'll just be messy and confusing, and who knows what's going to go on, or just choose me. Just make me your king. Abimelech, I should be the king on my own. Isn't that better for you? And he says to the people of Shechem, and don't forget, we're related. See what he's saying? Look, this is going to be better. Blood is thicker than water. Do me a solid, and I'll do you a solid as well. If you make me king, won't that be better for everyone? Seems sensible, doesn't it? And so they give him silver for their campaign, and he gets these guys that, what are we told about them? Reckless scoundrels. They're not the kind of guys that you should want on your side campaigning for you, but Abimelech doesn't care, and it seems like the people of Shechem don't care. They just want power and influence, and so we see his character very quickly, don't we, in verse 5. Abimelech went to his father's home in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers. Is that really the guy you want to be the king? Surely not. And yet, that is exactly the guy they carry on choosing to be king. Even after that, they crown him their king. Maybe they're thinking, well, it's better to have him on our side than against us, right? But, well, that's just going to come back and bite them. Because actually one of them escapes, doesn't he? Jotham, the youngest son, manages to escape Abimelech's clutches, and then he dramatically appears on the top of Mount Gerizim, which, maybe slightly ironically, means Mount of Blessing. And on this Mount of Blessing, he calls down a curse on the people and tells this parable of judgment. And this parable with the trees, actually I think it is relatively straightforward. On Monday, when we started looking at this, kind of read this passage and thought, what on earth is this all about? But actually, the more I've dug into it, I think it's quite straightforward. You see, it's a parable of what is the right way for the Israelites to go looking for a king. He's saying, have you done the right thing of trying to find the godliest, greatest person to read, the person who fills everything that Deuteronomy 17 says a king should be like? Have you asked them and they've refused, and you've asked and they've refused, and you've asked and they've refused, and you finally ended up on Abimelech as the best person you could find who said yes? Or have you not done any of that? You've gone against what God says is right, and you've just chosen the guy that you think will give you what you want. Because that's what the parable is saying. They've asked the olive tree, and the olive tree says no. They ask the fig tree, and the fig tree says no. They ask the grapevine, and the grapevine says go, no. And so they end up with a thorn bush. And the thorn bush says yes. Have you really tried to find a Deuteronomy 17 king, Israelites? I think that's what Jotham is saying. Have you really acted in good faith in all of this? Verse 16, I think, is really the key to all of that. Have you acted honourably and in good faith by making Abimelech king? Have you been fair to Jerubbaal, that's the other name for Gideon, and his family? Have you treated him as he deserves? And I hope we all know that the answer to that is no, not a chance they have done that. They've not acted honourably. They've plotted. They've allowed murder to happen. They've done all of the wrong kinds of things. See, if they have acted honourably, if they have acted in good faith, well, Jotham says, well, may God bless you. Would Abimelech be a blessing to you, and would you be a blessing to Abimelech? But we know that they haven't acted in good faith. We know that they've been plotting and doing the wrong thing, that they haven't cared about what God says a king should be like. They've just gone for whoever and whatever they think will give them power and influence and success. and it is all going to go horribly wrong. What does he say in verse 20? If you haven't, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and let fire come out from you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and consume Abimelech. Don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king. Or, Jotham says, may you face God's judgment. Well, we don't know what's going to happen next, so Gisella's going to come up and read the rest of our passage to us to see how this plays out. But potential spoilers alert, unsurprisingly, it doesn't go well for the people who reject God's plans and God's king. So Gisella's going to come up. If you've closed your Bible, it's page 252, and we're going to be reading on from verse 22 all the way through to chapter 10, verse 5. That's okay. So from there, from after Abimelech.
To verse 5. After Abimelech had governed Israel for 3 years, God stirred up animosity between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem, so that they acted treacherously against Abimelech. God did this in order that the crime against Jerubaal's 70 sons, the shedding of their blood, might be avenged on their brother Abimelech and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him murder his brothers. In opposition to him, these citizens of Shechem set men on the hilltops to ambush and rob everyone who passed by, and this was reported to Abimelech. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, moved with his clan into Shechem, and its citizens put their confidence in him. After they had gone out into the field and gathered the grapes and trodden them, they held a festival in the temple of their god. While they were eating and drinking, they cursed Abimelech. Then Gaal, son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech, and why should we Shechemites be subject to him? Isn't he Jerubaal's son, and isn't Zebul his deputy? Serve the family of Hamor, Shechem's father. Why should we serve Abimelech? If only this people were under my command, then I would get rid of him. I would say to Abimelech, call out your whole army." When Zebul, the governor of the city, heard what Gaal, son of Ebed, said, he was very angry. Under cover, he sent messengers to Abimelech, saying, "Gaal, son of Ebed, and his clan have come to Shechem and are stirring up the city against you. Now then, during the night, you and your men should come and lie in wait in the fields. In the morning at sunrise, advance against the city. When Gaal and his men come out against you, seize the opportunity to attack them." So Abimelech and all his troops set out by night and took up concealed positions near Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, had gone out and was standing at the entrance of the city gate just as Abimelech and his troops came out from their hiding place. When Gaal saw them, he said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains." Zebul replied, "You mistake the shadows of the mountains for men." But Gaal spoke up again, "Look, people are coming down from the central hill, and a company is coming from the direction of the diviner's tree." Then Zebul said to him, "Where is your big talk now, you who said, 'Who is Abimelech, that we should be subject to him?' Aren't these the men you ridiculed? Go out and fight them." So Gaal led out the citizens of Shechem and fought Abimelech. Abimelech chased them all the way to the entrance of the gate, and many were killed as they fled. Then Abimelech stayed in Aramah, and Zebul drove Gaal and his clan out of Shechem. The next day, the people of Shechem went out to the fields, and this was reported to Abimelech. So he took his men, divided them into 3 companies, and set an ambush in the fields. When he saw the people coming out of the city, he rose to attack them. Abimelech and the companies with him rushed forward to a position at the entrance of the city gate. Then 2 companies attacked those in the fields and struck them down. All that day, Abimelech pressed his attack against the city until he had captured it and killed its people. Then he destroyed the city and scattered salt over it. On hearing this, the citizens in the tower of Shechem went into the stronghold of the temple of El-Berith. When Abimelech heard that they had assembled there, he and all his men went up to Mount Zammon. He took an axe and cut off some branches, which he lifted to his shoulders. He ordered the men with him, "Quick, do what you've seen me do." So all the men cut branches and followed Abimelech. They piled them against the stronghold and set it on fire with the people still inside. So the people in the Tower of Shechem, about 1,000 men and women, also died. Next, Abimelech went to Thebez and besieged it and captured it. Inside the city, however, was a strong tower to which all the men and women, all the people of the city, had fled. They locked themselves in and climbed up on the tower roof. Abimelech went to the tower and attacked it. But as he approached the entrance to the tower to set it on fire, a woman dropped an upper millstone on his head and cracked his skull. Hurriedly, he called to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that they can't say a woman killed him." So his servant ran him through, and he died. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they went home. Thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also made the people of Shechem pay for all their wickedness. The curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came on them. And then chapter 10, after the time of Abimelech, a man of Issachar named Tola, son of Puah, son of Dodo, rose to save Israel. He lived in Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim. He led Israel for 23 years, then he died and was buried in Shamir. He was followed by Jair of Gilead, who led Israel for 22 years. He had 30 sons who rode 30 donkeys. They controlled 30 towns in Gilead, which to this day are called Havoth Jair. When Jair died, he was buried in Camon.
Fantastic, thank you, Gisela. Just a little hint for all of you. Nobody can actually speak ancient Hebrew anymore, so just pick however you want to say it and stick with it, and none of us will be any the wiser. But this whole situation, and almost the whole book of Judges, really, it reads like some Shakespearean tragedy or Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. There's all kinds of strange turns and intrigue, isn't there? But the big thing, like I've said earlier, is this is about helping us see how foolish it is if we put our trust in the wrong kind of king. And we're seeing, you see, that in God's providence, evil will destroy itself. And that behind evil and the defeat of evil, God is always there, sovereign over all things, that God's plan and God's purposes will come to pass. See, remember what Jotham had said in verse 20? If you have not acted honourably, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and let fire come out from you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and consume Abimelech. And that is exactly what happens over the rest of the chapter. The leaders of Shechem, they've put their trust in Abimelech. He's the one that they want to leave, but well, very quickly it seems they grow sick of him, don't they? For whatever reason, and we're not given the details, but they decide they don't really want him to be king, and so they place bandits in the hills. It seems that most likely that's more about discrediting him and his rule, so that they can turn around and say, there's no point having Abimelech king. Look, he can't even keep us safe, rather than the hope that the bandits might attack and defeat Abimelech. But this new guy enters, Gal. He enters town and he talks a big game about how much he can do and how successful he will be, and he turns their heads because, well, to be honest, he's exactly like Abimelech. How often are our heads turned by the same kind of wrong person or situation that we've fallen for before? Abimelech had said, hadn't he, oh, you don't want 70 guys in charge, you want me in charge. And here God is saying, oh, you don't want Abimelech in charge, you want me in charge. That he's the same kind of character as Abimelech. And the Shechemites, the people of Israel, are just falling for the same wrong kind of king again. He's making all these boasts at a drunken party, and the people haven't learnt their lesson. They think, oh, well, let's get rid of Abimelech and put this guy in charge. Instead, only this time, Abimelech's got a man on the inside, doesn't he? He's got Zebul, who seems to be one of the governors, one of the rulers of the place, has heard all of this drunken boasting, and he is not very pleased with it. He's on Abimelech's side still, so he goes and whispers to Abimelech, there's this guy causing trouble. You need to teach him a lesson. So why don't you get your men, you come and sneak into the outside of the city, and I'll get him out, and you can show who's really powerful, who's really boss. How often are our heads turned by the same wrong things that we've fallen for in the past? Oh, well, I'm not going to put my trust in the lottery anymore. I'm going to win big on the horses instead. Completely different. Oh, I'm not hoping that this job's what's going to make me happy. Actually, it's going to be that job instead. Oh, that relationship, I've realised that relationship's not what it's meant up to be. Instead, I'm going to chase after this relationship instead. Oh, I don't want to follow Abimelech. Gaal, he looks much, much better. You see, we all go round and round in the same circles, falling for the same wrong things again and again and again. We need to be careful when we see these stories that we don't look at the Israelites and think, oh, you're so foolish. What are you doing? We need to realize we are just as tempted to make the same kinds of foolish mistakes as them, which is why we need to learn the lesson not to fall for the same kinds of king, not to go chasing after people like this or situations like this or promises that will never succeed. Don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king, because look what happens to Gaal, their new kind of fancy man. Abimelech and his team kind of hide outside in the fields, and Gaal and Zebul are they're down by the gate having a chat, and Gaal looks and he spots something. And it's almost comedy, isn't it, when Zebul's like, no, it's just the shadows on the mountains. What are you talking about, Gaal? And then he sees more people moving, and he panics, and he sees something, and then what does Zebul say? Where's your big talk now, you who said, who's Abimelech, that we should be subject to him? Aren't these the men you ridiculed? Go out and fight them. See, it was big talk in the pub last night. Will he follow through with his actions? And so he's kind of almost forced to act. He's been showing off that he's the guy that they should have as their king instead, so he's forced to go out, and, well, it's just a rout, isn't it? Abimelech and his guys completely destroy Gaal. The vengeance is sweet. Only we already know the kind of guy that Abimelech is, the guy who would murder 70 of his own brothers to get power. And so defeating this upstart opposition isn't enough for him. He's got to have vengeance on the people of Shechem as well. So the next day he gets his people to hide in the fields again, and when the normal people of Shechem come out to work, he destroys them. He's got a thirst for blood. Is it any surprise? This was the character of the guy you put in charge. Are you surprised when that violence turns on you? And so the people of Shechem are destroyed. And some of the powerful, influential, mighty ones, they go and hide in this stronghold in the town, thinking maybe we'll be safe here. Only Abimelech, well, he starts getting brushwood, and he gets his men to get brushwood, and they build this fire around the surrounds of it, and they burn them up. It's horrific, isn't it? Is this really the person that they put their trust in? Someone who would do this kind of awful thing? And the people are destroyed. And yet, even then, Abimelech isn't satisfied. He's had his vengeance, but now he moves on to another town. In lots of ways, an innocent town. As far as we know, they've had nothing to do with any of this, and yet he goes. Verse 15, next Abimelech went to Thebez and besieged it and captured it. And the same thing happens again. The people retreat to a strong tower, and Abimelech thinks, oh, I've done this before, easy, we'll go and burn this place up again. And so he gathers the wood, he goes there, he presumably is just about to light it with a match, and wham. Poetic justice. The man who killed 70 of his brothers on one stone has his head crushed by another. And yet, even as he dies, he cares more about his reputation than on doing the right thing. He begs his servant, oh, please, you finish me off so that no one will say I was killed by a woman. That'd be too embarrassing for me. He's literally dying. That should not be what matters to him. And of course, as we know, as it's recorded for us in the Bible, we all know that really he was killed by a woman. And this unknown woman of Thebes killed this false king. Evil will destroy itself. And God is behind it all. All evil will be defeated, and God sovereignly will make sure it is so. Look back at verses 22 to 24. Let me just read a couple of those sentences again. Let me read from verse 23. God stirred up between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem so that they could enacted treacherously against Abimelech. God did this in order that the crime against Jerubaal's 70 sons, the shedding of their blood, might be avenged on their brother Abimelech and on the citizens of Shechem who had helped him murder his brothers. And again, verse 56, thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done. God is behind this. All of the evil in the world will be defeated and destroyed by the Lord. Abimelech and Shechem are guilty before God, and they finally pay the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate price for their sin. And that is true for them, and it is true for us. That every human being who has ever lived will one day have to face God in judgment for our sin. And the Bible is very clear, not one of us is innocent. And so we have a choice. We can try and stand and pay for our own sins and justify ourselves on our own. And let me tell you, that will not go well for us. We will be condemned. Or we can put our trust in Jesus as our King, who says that he will die for our sins in our place so that we can be forgiven. That's what the cross is, isn't it? As Jesus dies and faces God's judgment so that we don't have to. So when we face God's judgment, we can either try and defend ourselves, or we can put our trust in Jesus, who will pay that price for us. You see, Jesus is the king that we need, the king that Abimelech is nowhere near being, the king that no human king has ever managed to be. He is the only one who perfectly fulfills all of God's requirements in Deuteronomy chapter 17. You see, there's all kinds of people and things that we put our trust in, aren't there? There's all kinds of wrong things that we depend on. Maybe they're things that we think will make us successful, popular, powerful, rich. It might be people, it might be jobs, it might be places, it might be situations. There are plenty of things that we might think, oh, it's easier to follow after that than follow after Jesus. But they will fail us. They are all the wrong kind of king. Only Jesus will never fail us. Only Jesus will always live and rule and reign and rescue us. Only Jesus will never, like Abimelech and Shechem, turn on us and ultimately destroy us. See, the people of Shechem thought, well, we know Abimelech's a bit dodgy. We know he's not very nice, but at least if he's on our side, we'll be fine. Only that evil turned on them and ended up destroying them. The Jews of Jesus' day decided that it was better to follow after Caesar, who had enslaved and oppressed them, than Jesus, just because they thought it would give them a little bit more comfort, a little bit more ease, a little bit more power. But it didn't. But Jesus rescued us. Jesus is the king that we need. He is the only one who can give us total forgiveness, total comfort, who will never leave us or forsake us, who has come as a king, but not a king that's come to be served, but who's come to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. He is the one worth trusting. He is the one worth following. So if we learn anything from Judges chapter 9, it should be this: don't put your trust in the wrong kind of king. Put your trust in Jesus alone. Let me pray. Lord Jesus, please show us the foolishness of all of the wrong things that we trust in. That everything that they might promise us, the power, the success, the comfort, the ease, whatever it might be, that they won't last. And ultimately will end up destroying themselves, Lord. But you will never fail us. You alone can save. So help us to know that it is better to live our lives serving and trusting in you now, knowing that one day we will be with you in your kingdom forever.